Hey there, Caddo Middle School math teachers. Welcome to this session entitled Illustrative Mathematics Unit Planning. And in this session, what we're wanting to do is acknowledge the importance of a unit plan. And some of you may think it's more important than others of you, and that's okay. But I want to help you see the important components there to develop an efficient system for constructing meaningful unit plans. So that will involve us looking at different components of that. And then ultimately what I hope you will do as a result of this session is construct a meaningful unit plan in the next curriculum unit that you'll be teaching. So let's jump straight in. First of all, a lot of this information comes from the State Department of Education, and then I brought in some other things from other resources. But the purpose of a unit plan. Let's take a look at these three bullets. First one says, identify student performance necessary to master content and connect to end-of-year goals. So that's sort of twofold there on that first bullet there, that we want to think about what they need in order to do well in this content, coming into the unit. And then also just having a bigger picture in our minds of how this connects to state testing and where we want these students to be at the end of the year so that they're prepared for whatever comes next for them. The second bullet there, establish lesson objectives and student practice that scaffolds student learning to meet the unit standards in assessment. Now, I will say right up front on this particular purpose, the second purpose here, is that a lot of this is built into our curriculum. And because we're using a Tier 1 curriculum resource as indicated by our State Department of Education, we can have some confidence that this sort of takes care of itself. Now, that said, as teachers, we still need to make sure that we have our minds wrapped around what that looks like. So we go in and look at our curriculum for that entire unit, lesson by lesson, at the learning targets, the lesson objectives, and we just sort of make sure, verify that the scaffolding is taking place. But that's a nice thing about using our curriculum that we have, is that that's pretty much taken care of for us. It is established, but it's good for us as teachers as we are planning for the upcoming unit that we go through and look at that ourselves. And you may question it from time to time. That wouldn't be out of the ordinary at all. And I know some teachers from time to time have switched the order of lessons because they felt like the scaffolding wasn't quite what it should be. But I think for the most part, you'll see in our illustrative mathematics curriculum that scaffolding is sound and solid. And then the third bullet is really the ultimate purpose of what we're trying to accomplish here, is just establish a solid foundation for your daily lesson plans. If you just start off a unit by looking only at lesson 1 and you prepare to teach lesson 1, and then you move on to lesson 2 and only prepare to teach lesson 2, you might get the job done. But as a teacher, having a clear picture of the big picture of that unit, the overall intent, I think is super important and will go a long way in helping you be more effective on those day-to-day lessons. So again, this part here comes mostly from the State Department. I've made some minor modifications, but these elements of the unit planning process, content standards being element 1, element 2, assessment, element 3, daily lessons / scaffolding, and then element 4, materials and resources. So the content standards there, and this comes straight from illustrative mathematics. What are we building on? So what are those prior grade standards or standards that were addressed earlier in this current course? What are the standards we're addressing now in this unit? And then what are the standards in this unit building toward either in future units of this course or next year in the life of these students? As far as assessment, obviously, I've customized this because we have a pre-unit diagnostic this year, our day-to-day formative, summative assessments, formative or summative or both, and then our end-of-unit assessment. Now, the pre-unit diagnostic is something that we have a high expectation on in our district. The other two bullets are really totally up to you. The day-to-day formative, whether it's formative or summative or a combination, and then how often you're conducting those assessments. That's up to the teacher. Even the end of unit assessment is in large part up to the teacher. However, our curriculum does provide a version of a unit assessment that you could use. I know some teachers modify those assessments, and sometimes some teachers totally create their own. And that is your call and your authority to do that. But it's definitely something that needs to be considered going into the unit. And then your daily lessons, of course. Now when we make a unit plan, we're not making necessarily each individual lesson plan for that unit. That would be a lot. But what we are wanting to do is to review and understand those lesson objectives, looking ahead and seeing how everything fits together. And so that, we can better prepare our students for meeting those expectations for that end of unit assessment. So if we don't have all this stuff in mind ahead of time, again, teaching just day to day is going to be less effective. And then the fourth element, according to our State Department, is the materials and resources. And so, and I think that's pretty obvious that as we start to unpack this unit, we would start to identify materials and resources that I need. So if there are some actual manipulatives or tools, calculators, measuring devices, counting blocks, whatever it might be, I would be able to identify those going in, and that way I'm not going to be caught the night before trying to pull things together in order to get this lesson accomplished. All right, so I've broken this down into some steps, and you'll see the element that the steps are related to, or the elements in some cases, at the top. So element 1 was the content standards element, content knowledge and your standards. And for step 1, I put here, understand the content. Now, I love this chart from Illustrative Mathematics because, especially if I'm a 7th grade teacher, it's really cool because I can see where the kids are coming from in 6th grade and where they're going to in 8th by unit number. And then, of course, I can dig into the digital platform and find more specifics about this. But I think this is a cool chart to kind of get that going as far as building on, addressing, and building toward. And then the other thing we have to sometimes look at, if I'm a 6th grade teacher, that building on is not showing there for my 6th grade. So I would need to maybe go to the coherence maps. That's one resource we could go to find some prior grade standards on which this unit might be building. So if this unit is covering 6 RPA 2, then I can go to the coherence maps and I can see that's building on some 4th and 5th grade standards there. And I can take a quick look at those standards. And it's not an in-depth study, but it's just a glance to make sure I know where students are coming from. This is especially helpful with regard to any needs for remediation. When we give our diagnostic test and we see that students are experiencing some big learning gaps, then I can go back to these standards and know how to fill those gaps a little bit better. And if you're not familiar with coherence maps, I would strongly encourage you to go check it out. Not only do you see the map here, but you've also got tasks connected to each standard that can be very helpful. Also, we have our companion documents from the State Department. So if I were teaching 7 RPA 2 in this unit, so this would be standards I'm addressing, then I can look at this companion document and not just see the standard, but I can really dig deeper into what this standard focuses on and even examples of what it might look like in an assessment. You also see on the 2.0 version of these companion documents, you see remediation and components of rigor have been added. And so that's pretty helpful as well. And in the same light, you could also, let me go back here to the coherence maps. If I'm an 8th grade teacher and I want to see what this is building toward, then I could look out to the right and I could see standards that this is building toward. And same thing in the companion documents, I could look at those. And in our scope and sequence, I put this up here because now we don't have the building toward in here, but we do have the standards, the current addressing standards. We can click on these standards and open up the companion documents. And then out to the right, we have those prior grade standards, those building on standards in this remediation column. And we can click on those as well, where it says PGS, that stands for prior grade standards. We can click on those and see the companion documents and get our mind wrapped around that, because most of us don't have our own grade level standards memorized, much less the prior grade standards. So those are there, quickly accessible for you to be able to get the information you need. Okay, step 2 then is gathering and reviewing diagnostic and unit assessments, beginning to gather and create daily assessments. And notice the keyword there is begin. You're not necessarily doing every detail of every day throughout this unit. What you're trying to do is, this is really almost an extension of the first step in building your content knowledge and making sure you have your mind wrapped around all the standards. When you're looking at the assessments, that's giving you another aspect of what this is going to look like. You know, even in the companion document, we saw some sample assessment items. So to look at not only the diagnostic, which shows what we're building on, but looking ahead at the end of unit assessment to kind of assure that we have a clear picture of where we're heading with this unit from day to day. And then, you know, I put the second thing in there about gathering and creating a daily assessment. Again, you may not do a whole lot of creation here in the unit planning process, but you might identify some key points along throughout the unit with certain lessons where you want to dig in with some specific assessments, maybe certain days that you're going to give a homework assignment or extended classwork assignment or something like that. Maybe it's an assessment where you just need to give them something to work on and you need to go around and observe and provide individual assistance, something like that. But all kinds of ways to assess on a day-to-day basis and throughout the unit. And so that would be the second step in planning the unit, is to really dig into those assessments. And then the third step that I have here is, and it goes right along with element 3, daily lessons and scaffolding, that here we would review the scaffold learning objectives and identify math practice standards. So I want to actually go to the McGraw-Hill website now and look at a particular section. So if I'm in Unit 3, and remember what I'm talking about here, reviewing the scaffold learning objectives, identifying math practice standards, we're not tons of detail here. What you want to do is skim through and make sure you understand where they're going. So it's kind of a continuation of step 1 there with the concept knowledge and trying to keep our mind wrapping around this tighter and tighter. So here on a McGraw-Hill website, I can go by unit and I can get a look at the Unit 3 overview. This is a really valuable document. I would say if the only thing you're going to do with unit, if you were only going to do one thing with unit planning, it would be, I would say, read this document. And this would help a lot. So it gives you an overview of the unit. You can already see here, I've got mathematical practices in here, which was the second bullet on that slide. So MP6, which deals with, I think, attending to precision. And MP2, you're going to have to remind me on that. But anyway, we can look those up quickly and see what's being emphasized in this unit. And scrolling on down, I've got lots of more information, the new terminology, and you can see here progression of disciplinary language throughout the lessons, and they've got the lessons kind of indicated there. Then I've got a list of the lessons, and I don't know if you noticed this when we were looking at the scope and sequence a minute ago, but this Unit 3 actually goes through 11 lessons. In our scope and sequence, we only go through lesson 9, so something to consider there. When we talked about the pacing in step 1, then we would make that consideration, and we would also note the key lessons and see if there's any way we can abbreviate some things and combine if we're behind in pacing, that sort of thing. So that's step 3. And by the way, if I go back to that, in addition to the unit plan, then I can also dig in, if I have the time and want to make the time, I could go lesson by lesson. And this might be more part of your daily lesson planning as opposed to your unit lesson plan, your unit plan. But here I can actually dig in and look at more specifics with regard to that lesson. I was trying to find the exact document here. I'm not sure which one I want to click on. No, that's not it. And I apologize for the delay there. There is a document where we can go and find more specifics about the lesson. So, yeah, I'll just skip that for now because I'm not seeing what I was hoping I was going to see there. But again, going back to the unit plan, obviously if you're doing unit planning, that's that's where you're going to want to look to find most of this overview type information. Okay, then we're going to move on to step 4. And you'll notice here, again, 2 elements here. So continuation of element 3, your daily lessons and scaffolding, and materials and resources. And here we want to develop a general plan for daily instruction. Again, not a specific plan, not looking and making daily lesson plans, although you might end up doing some of that depending on the amount of time you have. But the idea here is, let me develop a general plan for daily instructional tasks with a focus on mastery of objectives and standards. So here's where I would consider where you are with pacing. We kind of alluded to this a second ago. Do I have time for enrichment? Do I need to follow the scope and sequence plan as is? Or do I need to abbreviate if possible because I'm behind and I need to get caught up? Also, ensure key lessons are given ample time. And then finally, identify and gather resources needed for the unit. So I'm going to take us back quickly to our scope and sequence. And if I'm looking at this unit 3, again, I mentioned this, that you're only seeing 9 lessons here. So the teachers who put this together a couple of years ago agreed that lessons 10 and 11 were not critical and left those out. And they also noted here with this double asterisk that lesson 3.3 and lesson 3.7 are key lessons, super important. And you want to make sure you have ample time for those key lessons, as we just mentioned. And then if you are behind in pacing, you might pay attention to possibly, I'm just looking here at 2 circumference lessons. And I might dig in as the teacher and say, is there some way that I could abbreviate those 2 lessons into 1, or just cut them down in some way to save some time? Also, something that stands out here is lesson 9, applying area of circles. Now, I'm not a fan of eliminating anything. In fact, if I had my way, I would teach every lesson in the book and as thoroughly as possible, but I know time is a factor. And oftentimes I see teachers skipping a lesson here at the end where it deals with applying the math. Again, those are your decisions. I wouldn't be opposed to anything like that, but I also would be very careful because that does cover some high priority standards. And you'll notice in our components of rigor over here that application is a big part of those 4 lessons. But just again, if you're way behind on time and really crunched, then those are some ideas on how you can catch up. The resources needed, that's going to require digging into the lessons just a little bit to see if you're going to need anything in particular for those lessons. All right, and then the final step, and this may be a little goofy to some of you guys, and you may see it as unnecessary, and that's okay. But I'm going to throw it out to you anyway. And something that I just kind of added on that I think it's important, if you can, to market the unit. And what I mean by that is simply, just as we provide instructions and introductions and closure for each lesson, and we know how important those components of lesson are, we should also consider possibly ways to introduce and close out each unit. So as we maybe give a unit test on one unit at the end of the unit, then we might consider closing out that day with, as after students have turned in the test, with just a quick overview of what's coming. You may even go so far as to provide a syllabus with, for that unit with key dates. And I'm really in favor of a unit syllabus over a year syllabus, because that year syllabus, we just have so many things that come up, not just extreme things like last year with COVID, but also in any given year of instruction, there are surprises that come in our calendar. And so I think a unit syllabus is much more realistic, and you can give students key dates and be a little more accurate with those dates than you can on a year-long syllabus. Anything with projects, formal assessments, things like that. But just giving them an overview of the unit in some way, and maybe how that ties into a prior unit and where that's leading them in the future, whether it's a future unit in this particular course or how this might prepare them for a course coming up next year. So that's what I have for unit planning. I know that was kind of an overview, a sketch. I hope you will do some serious consideration of this. Again, our goals were to, acknowledge the importance of a unit plan, and you may say it's not so important, and that's your prerogative. And it may not be the most important thing. I would agree, but I would say that it could be a difference maker in some cases. We also wanted you to consider an efficient system for constructing meaningful unit plans, and so that's kind of the steps that I gave you, steps 1 through 5, and obviously those are subject to modifications as you see fit. But what I really hope you will do is that third bullet is that you will sit down and find, some time, if not this school year, maybe this summer or on a spring break when you've got nothing else to do, which I know that's never the case, but just in case. But you might consider constructing a meaningful unit plan for an upcoming curriculum unit. And just see, make an assessment for yourself as to whether or not you think it makes a difference. A couple of next steps as we move forward. So again, just to copy that, consider how a unit plan will help you do a better job of teaching your students. Give it a try. And then I need you to complete the kick-up evaluation for this session, as always. So please go to kickup.co and pull up this session, and you should see the form for the evaluation form for the session. So thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate your hard work throughout this incredibly challenging school year. And so many of you have stayed so positive when it would be so easy to be negative. And I really appreciate that. And I appreciate the work you do on behalf of kids. It's just amazing what you guys are pulling off. So thank you for being a part of this session. Thank you for all the hard work you do. And I hope I get to see you very soon. Take care.